The restaurant smelled like money. That was the first thing anyone noticed when they walked through those heavy glass doors on Fifth Avenue. Not just expensive food, but actual wealth. The kind that clung to designer perfume and leather briefcases. The kind that made people like Elena Rodriguez feel completely invisible. She had been working at Bellissimo for almost 2 years now, and most days felt exactly the same. Wake up at 5 in the morning in her tiny studio apartment in Queens. Take the subway for 40 minutes. Change into the crisp white shirt and black pants that served as her uniform. Tie her hair back. Pin on the name tag. Smile, serve, repeat. Elena was 24, though some days she felt much older. Her hands told the real story. They were the hands of someone who worked 3 jobs, who scrubbed dishes until her fingers pruned, who carried heavy trays for hours until her arms ached. But they were also hands that remembered something else. Something beautiful. The lunch shift was always busy. Men in expensive suits talked about stock prices and golf scores. Women with perfect manicures discussed charity events and vacation homes in the Hamptons. Elena moved between the tables like a ghost, refilling water glasses and taking orders. She had learned early on that most customers never really looked at her. They looked through her. "Miss, this water has ice in it." "I specifically asked for no ice." "Yes, ma'am." "I'll bring you a new one right away." "And the bread is cold." "Is it really that difficult to serve warm bread?" "I apologize. I'll get you a fresh basket." Elena smiled, the same smile she had perfected over 2 years. The one that said she cared deeply about ice and bread, even though her mind was somewhere else entirely. It was always somewhere else. During her break, she sat in the back alley on an overturned crate eating the sandwich she had packed from home. Inside the restaurant, there was a piano, a gorgeous Steinway grand that sat in the main dining room like a piece of art. Sometimes during slow afternoons, the owner would hire someone to play soft jazz, but most of the time it just sat there silent and perfect. Elena looked at her phone. 3 missed calls from her mother. She knew what they were about. The medical bills were piling up again. Her father's treatment was expensive and insurance only covered so much. The diabetes had gotten worse last year, and then came the heart problems. Every month felt like drowning in paperwork and debt. She had 2 other jobs besides Bellissimo. On weekends, she cleaned offices in Midtown. On Tuesday and Thursday evenings, she worked at a grocery store stocking shelves. Between everything, she managed maybe 5 hours of sleep on a good night. But when she got home, no matter how tired she was, she always sat down at the old upright piano in the corner of her studio apartment. That piano was older than she was. Her mother had bought it at a yard sale when Elena was 7 years old, back when they still had dreams that didn't cost so much. Back when her father worked construction and came home tired but healthy. Back when paying for piano lessons seemed possible, Mrs. Chen had been her teacher. An elderly woman who lived 3 blocks away and charged $20 per lesson. For 4 years, Elena went to Mrs. Chen's apartment every Saturday morning. She learned scales and chords. She learned Beethoven and Chopin. She learned that when she played, the world became different, quieter, more bearable. When Elena was 11, the lessons stopped. Money got tight. Her father got injured on a job site. Priorities shifted. Mrs. Chen hugged her on that last day and said something Elena never forgot. "You have a gift, child. Real talent is rare. Don't let it die, but gifts didn't pay bills. Talent didn't buy medicine or groceries." So the piano lessons ended, and Elena learned to be practical instead. Still, she never stopped playing. At night, after her 3 jobs, after helping her mother with phone calls to insurance companies, after eating dinner standing up because she was too exhausted to sit, Elena would play that old upright piano. Her neighbors probably hated her for it, but she kept the volume low and played anyway. She taught herself new pieces by watching videos online. She learned jazz and blues by ear. She wrote her own music sometimes, though she never showed it to anyone. The piano was her secret, the one thing in her life that was just hers. The afternoon shift at Bellissimo dragged on. A woman at table 12 sent her salmon back twice. A man at table 7 left a $2 tip on a $100 bill. Another Tuesday. As Elena cleared plates from a corner booth, she noticed something on the staff bulletin board near the kitchen. A fancy flyer, printed on thick cream paper with gold lettering. The kind of announcement that made it clear this was for important people, not staff. The Rothschild Foundation Annual Gala. Black tie event. This Saturday evening. The restaurant was closing to regular customers for the night to host it. All servers were required to work. Elena barely glanced at it before pushing through the kitchen doors with her tray of dirty dishes. "Did you see we're doing the Rothschild thing this weekend?" Christina, another server, was refilling salt shakers near the dishwasher. "They're paying us double time at least." "I saw," Elena said, scraping leftover food into the trash. "Some famous piano player is performing. Victor something. From Europe. My boyfriend looked him up. He's a really big deal, apparently." Elena felt something twist in her chest. Of course there would be a piano player. Of course someone who had been given all the right opportunities, all the training, all the connections, would be there performing for people who probably wouldn't even really listen. She pushed the thought away. Bitterness was useless. That night, back in her tiny apartment, Elena sat at her piano. Her fingers found the keys in the dark. She didn't need light to play. The muscle memory was so deep it felt like breathing. She played Rachmaninoff, the second piano concerto, the piece that had made her fall in love with classical music when she was 9 years old. She had taught herself the entire thing from YouTube videos in sheer determination. Every note was burned into her memory. The music filled her small apartment. It poured out of her like something alive. All the frustration of the day, all the exhaustion, all the crushed dreams and impossible bills, it all became music. Her hands moved across the keys with a precision that would have shocked her old teacher. She had gotten better over the years. Much better. Playing alone, with no one to perform for, with nothing to prove, she had become extraordinary. But extraordinary didn't matter when no one was listening. The song ended. Elena sat in the silence of her apartment, her hands still resting on the keys. Through the thin walls, she could hear her neighbor's television. A siren passed on the street below. The refrigerator hummed in the corner. Tomorrow would be another day of serving people who didn't see her. Another day of smiling through exhaustion. Another day of choosing between her own dreams and her family's. Survival. She didn't know that. Everything was about to change. She didn't know that Saturday night would be the night her invisible life would finally, impossibly become visible. All she knew was that she had to be at work by 4:00 on Saturday to prepare for some fancy gala where a famous pianist would play for people who had everything. Elena stood up from the piano bench, stretched her aching shoulders, and got ready for bed. She had another early shift in the morning. Saturday arrived faster than Elena expected. She barely slept the night before, her mind racing with worries about her father's upcoming doctor appointment and the stack of bills on her kitchen counter. But when 4:00 came, she was standing in front of Bellissimo's employee entrance ready for the longest shift of her week. The restaurant had been completely transformed. Elena walked through the back door and barely recognized the place. The regular dining room had been cleared out and replaced with round tables draped in white silk. Each table had towering flower arrangements that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Crystal glasses caught the light from chandeliers that had been polished until they sparkled like diamonds. "Elena, you're on champagne duty tonight," Miguel, the head server, handed her a crisp black vest to wear over her white shirt.
"Keep the glasses full."
"Don't speak unless spoken to. These people are paying $50,000 per seat." Elena's hands froze while buttoning the vest. $50,000 per person for one dinner. She thought about how that amount could change her family's entire life. Pay off the medical debt, fix the leak in her mother's bathroom, maybe even buy her father the special bed his doctor recommended. All that money, just for people to eat fancy food and feel important for a few hours. "You okay?" Miguel asked, noticing her expression. "Yeah, I'm fine." Elena finished buttoning the vest and tied back her hair. The guests started arriving at 7. Elena had seen wealthy people before, but this was different. These weren't just rich. These were the kind of people whose names appeared in business magazines. Women wore gowns that cost more than cars. Men wore watches that could fund a college education. They moved through the room with the easy confidence of people who had never worried about money in their entire lives. Elena circulated with her tray of champagne, refilling glasses and clearing empties. The conversations around her were surreal. "We're thinking of buying the villa in Tuscany, the one near where we stayed last summer. Did you see the Monet that sold at auction? 300 million, absolute steal. Our son just got accepted to Harvard. We're so proud, though honestly, the donation we made probably helped." Elena kept her face neutral and her smile pleasant. She had perfected the art of being present but invisible. She poured champagne and moved on, poured and moved on like a robot programmed for service. At the front of the room, on a raised platform, sat the Steinway grand piano. It was spotlit, like a jewel, its polished black surface reflecting the chandelier light. Elena tried not to look at it. Looking at it made her chest ache with something she didn't want to name. Around 8 o'clock, the room fell quiet. A man in an expensive tuxedo took the microphone at the front of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Rothschild Foundation Annual Gala." His voice was smooth and practiced. "Tonight we gather to support arts education for underprivileged youth." The irony wasn't lost on Elena. Rich people eating expensive food to help poor kids learn art. She wondered how many of those kids could actually be helped if everyone just donated the cost of their dinner instead of eating it. "And now," the man continued, "we have a very special treat. Flying in from Vienna, one of the world's most celebrated concert pianists, Victor Ashford." The crowd applauded. Elena stood against the wall with the other servers watching. A man walked out from the side entrance. He was maybe 50, with graying hair and a tailored tuxedo. But something was off. Elena noticed it immediately. His walk was unsteady. His face was flushed. When he reached the microphone, he swayed slightly. "Good evening," Victor Ashford said, his words slurring together. "It's an honor to be here, though I must say the champagne on the flight was exceptional." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Elena glanced at Miguel, who looked worried. Victor moved toward the piano bench, stumbling slightly. He sat down heavily, then stood back up. "You know what?" he said to the microphone, his voice too loud. "I've played for kings and queens. I've played in the greatest concert halls in the world. But tonight, I'm tired of playing for people who don't even really listen." The room went completely silent. Elena felt her heart start to pound. You sit there in your fancy clothes, pretending to care about art. But really, you're just here to be seen. To take pictures for your social media. To tell your friends you saw Victor Ashford play. An older woman in the front row stood up. "Someone get him off the stage." Victor laughed, a bitter sound. "The truth hurts, doesn't it?" He took a step forward and nearly fell. 2 security guards rushed onto the platform. What happened next was chaos. Victor Ashford started shouting. The guards tried to escort him out, but he pushed them away. He knocked over the piano bench. Women gasped. Men stood up from their tables. And then suddenly, Victor collapsed. Elena watched as paramedics were called. They arrived within minutes, checking his vital signs, loading him onto a stretcher. The famous concert pianist was wheeled out of Bellissimo, still mumbling incoherently, while 300 of New York's elite stood in shocked silence. The man in the tuxedo took the microphone again. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We're going to take a brief intermission while we sort out the evening's entertainment." Brief intermission. Elena almost laughed. The entire centerpiece of their $50,000 evening just got carried out by paramedics. She watched as the organizers gathered in a panicked huddle near the kitchen doors. Their voices carried. "Can we get someone else? Another pianist? At 8:30 on a Saturday night? Everyone's booked. What about the guy who plays jazz here on Wednesdays? He's in Florida. I already called. This is a disaster. Mrs. Rothschild is going to be devastated." Elena looked across the room and saw her. Mrs. Eleanor Rothschild. She was sitting at the center table, a tiny woman in her 70s wearing a midnight blue gown. Her face wasn't angry. It was sad. She looked at the empty piano like something precious had been broken. The organizers were still arguing. "We'll have to refund everyone. The foundation's reputation is ruined. We've been planning this for months. The musicians, the food, everything. Well, we don't have a pianist. What do you suggest we do?" Elena's hands were shaking. She set down her tray of champagne glasses on a nearby service table. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. What she was about to do was insane. It could get her fired. It could humiliate her in front of 300 wealthy strangers. But she thought about Mrs. Rothschild's sad face. She thought about the foundation helping kids learn music, kids like she used to be. And she thought about that beautiful Steinway sitting empty on the stage. Before she could talk herself out of it, Elena walked toward the group of panicked organizers. "Excuse me," she said quietly. They didn't hear her. They were too busy arguing. "Excuse me," she said louder. The event coordinator, a thin woman with a clipboard, turned to her with irritation. "Not now. We're dealing with a crisis." "I know," Elena said. "I can help. Unless you know a concert pianist who can be here in 10 minutes, I don't think so." Elena took a deep breath. Her whole body was shaking now. "I can play." The coordinator stared at her. "What?" "The piano. I can play it." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the coordinator laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. "You're a server." "I know. But I can play piano. I've been playing since I was 7. "This isn't a hobby recital," another organizer said. "This is a professional event." "I understand that. Do you have any idea what level of skill is required?" "Yes," Elena said, meeting their eyes. "I do." The coordinator looked at her like she was crazy. "This is ridiculous. We don't have time for this." "Let her try." Everyone turned. Mrs. Eleanor Rothschild had walked over. Up close, she was even smaller than she looked from across the room, but her eyes were sharp and kind. "Mrs. Rothschild, with all due respect, we can't just let a waitress—" "Why not?" The old woman's voice was firm. "What do we have to lose? The evening is already ruined. Let the girl try." The coordinator opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. "Fine. You have one chance. If you can't play, we're canceling everything." Elena nodded. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Mrs. Rothschild touched her arm gently. "What's your name, dear?" "Elena." "Well, Elena, show them what you can do." Elena walked toward the stage. Every eye in the room followed her. 300 wealthy, important people, all staring at the waitress in the black vest who thought she could save their evening. She climbed the steps to the platform. The Steinway Grand sat waiting. Under the spotlight, Elena could see her reflection in its polished surface. She looked terrified. She sat down on the bench, adjusted her position, placed her fingers on the keys. The room was completely silent. And then Elena began to play. The first note rang out across the ballroom like a bell. Elena's fingers touched the keys and suddenly everything else disappeared. The 300 people watching her, the coordinator who thought she was crazy, the fear that had been making her hands shake. All of it faded away until there was only the piano and the music. She started with Rachmaninoff, the second piano concerto, the piece she had played alone in her apartment 1,000 times. But this was different. This piano was different. The Steinway responded to her touch like it had been waiting for her. Every note was crisp and clear and perfect. The opening was soft, almost hesitant. Like a question being asked. Her left hand laid down the foundation while her right hand began to tell the story. And it was a story. Every piece of music told a story if you knew how to listen. This one was about longing, about wanting something beautiful that felt impossibly far away. Elena's fingers moved faster. The music began to build. She leaned into the keys, her whole body moving with the rhythm. The concerto swelled and grew, filling every corner of the massive room. She could feel it in her chest, in her bones. This was what she was born to do. The technique was flawless. Years of teaching herself, of practicing until her fingers ached, of studying videos and learning every nuance. It all poured out now. Her hands flew across the keys in passages that would challenge any professional pianist. Octave runs that required perfect precision, chord progressions that demanded strength and control. She hit every single note. In the audience, people had stopped whispering, stopped moving. A woman who had been checking her phone slowly lowered it. A man who had been heading toward the exit stopped in his tracks. The servers along the wall forgot they were supposed to be working. Mrs. Rothschild sat at her table with tears streaming down her face. Elena played on, lost in the music. The concerto, built to its first climax, a cascade of notes that felt like falling and flying at the same time. Her fingers hammered out the powerful chords, and the piano responded with a richness that made the air vibrate. Then, just as suddenly, the music softened, became gentle again, sad and beautiful, and full of hope. This was the part that always made Elena cry when she played it alone. The part that felt like every dream she'd ever had and every dream she'd ever lost. But she didn't cry now. She channeled everything into the music instead. All the double shifts and exhaustion, all the medical bills and impossible choices. All the nights she'd played this same piece on her cheap upright piano and imagined what it would sound like on a real Steinway. Now she knew. The first movement ended. For a moment, there was absolute silence in the ballroom. Elena's hands hovered over the keys. She could stop now. She had proven her point. But something inside her wasn't ready to stop. She transitioned smoothly into the second movement. This part was slower, more introspective. It required a delicate touch, the ability to make the piano whisper instead of shout. Elena's fingers barely seemed to touch the keys, yet each note rang out with perfect clarity. A few people in the audience gasped. This wasn't just competent playing. This was artistry. The event coordinator stood frozen by the kitchen door, her clipboard hanging forgotten at her side. Miguel, the head server, had his hand over his mouth. Christina was crying. Elena played on. She could feel the audience now, could feel their attention like a physical thing. But she wasn't playing for them. She was playing for herself. For the 7-year-old girl who had first sat down at a piano. For her mother who had scraped together money for lessons. For Mrs. Chen who had said she had a gift. For every person who had ever had to choose between their dreams and survival. The second movement ended, and Elena immediately began the third. This was the finale, fast and powerful and triumphant. Her hands raced across the keys. The music exploded from the piano like fireworks, left hand and right hand working in perfect coordination, creating harmonies that shouldn't be possible from just 10 fingers. She was breathing hard now, sweat on her forehead, but she didn't slow down. The music demanded everything, and she gave it. Every ounce of energy, every bit of skill she possessed. The concerto built and built, racing toward its conclusion. And then, without warning, Elena did something she had never done before. Something she had only dreamed about doing. She began to improvise. She took the classical piece and twisted it, added jazz influences, blues notes, something entirely her own. Her right hand played the original melody, while her left hand created a rhythm that was modern and fresh and completely unexpected. It shouldn't have worked. Classical and jazz shouldn't blend like this, but it did. The improvisation was brilliant. She took Rachmaninoff and made it new, made it hers, showed everyone in that room that she wasn't just someone who could copy what she'd learned. She was an artist with her own voice. The music swung and swayed. She played faster, her fingers barely visible as they flew across the keys. The piano sang and cried and laughed. She wove in a melody she'd written herself years ago, one she'd never shown anyone. It fit perfectly. Mrs. Rothschild was openly sobbing now. Other people in the audience had tears on their faces too. Some were recording on their phones, hands shaking as they tried to capture this impossible moment. Elena brought the improvisation back around to the original concerto. The finale was coming. She could feel it building. Every muscle in her body was working. Her foot controlled the pedals, adding depth and resonance. Her arms ached, but she pushed through. The final passage. The hardest part. A series of chords that required both hands to span almost the entire keyboard. She hit each one perfectly, the piano roaring under her command, and then the last chord. She held it, foot on the pedal, letting it ring out until the sound slowly faded into silence. Elena lifted her hands from the keys. She sat perfectly still, breathing hard, staring at the piano. She had just played for 45 minutes straight. Her hands were cramping. Her back hurt. She was exhausted, and she had never felt more alive. For 3 full seconds, nobody in the ballroom moved. Nobody breathed. The silence was complete. Then Mrs. Rothschild stood up. Her hands came together in a single clap. Then another. Then another. A man at her table stood and joined her. Then a woman. Then another person. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was on their feet. 300 people were applauding. And it wasn't polite charity applause. It was real. Thunderous. The sound filled the room like a physical force. Elena slowly stood from the piano bench. She turned to face the audience, and the applause grew even louder. People were shouting. Some were still crying. Mrs. Rothschild was clapping so hard her hands must have hurt. Elena stood there in her server's vest, her hair falling out of its tie, completely overwhelmed. She had imagined this moment before, late at night in her apartment. Imagined what it would feel like to play for an audience, to be recognized for her talent. But the reality was so much more intense than any fantasy. The applause continued. A minute, 2 minutes. People didn't want to stop. Elena felt tears finally start to fall down her own cheeks. She wiped them away quickly, but more came. Finally, Mrs. Rothschild made her way to the stage. The old woman moved slowly, but with purpose. When she reached Elena, she took both of her hands. "What is your name, dear?" Mrs. Rothschild asked again, though Elena had told her before. "Elena Rodriguez." "Elena Rodriguez," Mrs. Rothschild repeated, loud enough for nearby people to hear. "Where did you learn to play like that?" "I taught myself," Elena said quietly. "Mostly. I had lessons when I was young, but I've been teaching myself for years." Mrs. Rothschild shook her head in wonder. "That's impossible. Nobody teaches themselves to play like that." "I practiced every night," Elena said. "After work. I have a piano at home." "Why aren't you playing professionally? Why are you serving tables?" The question hung in the air. Elena looked at this kind old woman with her expensive gown and her foundation that supported arts education. How could she explain? How could someone who had always had money understand what it meant to not have any? "Because talent doesn't pay my father's medical bills," Elena said simply. "Dreams don't keep the lights on." Mrs. Rothschild's expression changed. Understanding and sadness mixed together. She squeezed Elena's hands tighter. "We need to talk," she said. "After the gala, we need to have a very long conversation." Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The audience was still applauding. People were coming up to the stage now, wanting to speak to her, to shake her hand. The event coordinator who had dismissed her earlier stood off to the side, looking stunned. Miguel pushed through the crowd and hugged Elena. "I had no idea," he said. "In 2 years I had no idea." "Nobody did," Elena said. Nobody asked. The rest of the evening was a blur. People kept coming up to her, asking questions, taking photos. Someone from a music magazine asked for an interview. A man who owned a concert hall gave her his card. A woman who taught at Juilliard wanted to know if she'd ever applied. Elena moved through it all in a daze. This didn't feel real. Any moment she would wake up in her tiny apartment and realize it was all a dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was happening. And as Elena finally sat down at an empty table, exhausted and overwhelmed, she realized that everything in her life was about to change. She just didn't know if she was ready for it. Elena woke up on Sunday morning to 8:47 missed calls and text messages. Her phone had been buzzing non-stop since she got home from the gala at midnight. She had finally turned off the sound around 2 in the morning. But when she woke up, the screen was filled with notifications, emails, voicemails, messages from numbers she didn't recognize. Her hands shook as she scrolled through them. Someone had recorded her performance and posted it online. The video had been shared thousands of times. Tens of thousands. She clicked on one link and watched herself playing the Steinway, her face intense with concentration. Completely lost in the music. The comments section was overwhelming. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. I'm literally crying. Who is she? This waitress has more talent than most professional pianists. The way she improvises at the end is insane." There were millions of views already. The video was spreading across every platform. People were calling her the Waitress pianist. News sites were picking up the story. A reporter had somehow found her mother's phone number and called asking for an interview. Elena sat on her bed, still in her pajamas, staring at her phone in disbelief. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. Her phone rang. It was Miguel from the restaurant. "Elena, don't come in today," he said immediately. Her stomach dropped. "Am I fired? What?" "No, the opposite. Mr. Bennett wants to see you tomorrow morning. The owner. He never comes in, but he's flying back from Europe just to meet you." Miguel paused. "But also, there are reporters outside the restaurant. Like a lot of them. It's crazy here." Elena walked to her window and looked down at the street. There was a news van parked outside her building. A woman with a microphone was talking to her neighbor, Mr. Park, who looked extremely confused. "This is insane," Elena whispered. "I know," Miguel said. "Listen, people are calling the restaurant non-stop. Record labels, concert halls. Some famous producer wants your number. I didn't give it to anyone, but Elena, this is huge." After she hung up, Elena just sat there. She should have felt happy, excited. This was what she'd dreamed about, wasn't it? Being discovered, being recognized for her talent, but all she felt was terrified. Her mother called an hour later, crying. Not sad crying. Happy. Crying, "Mia, I saw the video. Everyone saw the video. Mrs. Chen from down the street called me. She remembered you. She said she always knew you were special. Mama, I don't know what to do. You play piano, Mija. That's what you do. That's what you were always meant to do. But what about the bills? What about Papa's treatment?" Her mother was quiet for a moment. "We'll figure it out. We always do. But Elena, you can't keep sacrificing your dreams for us forever." Monday morning came too fast. Elena had barely slept. She kept checking her phone, watching the view count climb higher and higher. 5 million views. 10 million. The story was on national news now. Waitress stuns elite crowd with hidden talent. She took the subway to Bellissimo, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses even though it was cloudy. She still got recognized twice. A teenage girl asked for a photo. An older man told her she made him remember why he loved music. Mr. Bennett was waiting in his office when she arrived. He was a tall man in his 60s with gray hair and an expensive suit. Elena had never met him before. She'd only worked for the managers he hired. "Sit down, please," he said, gesturing to a leather chair. Elena sat, her hands clasped in her lap. "I'm going to be direct with you," Mr. Bennett said. "What you did Saturday night was remarkable. It was also completely inappropriate." Elena's heart sank. "I'm sorry, I just thought—" He held up his hand. "Let me finish. It was inappropriate because you're a server, not an entertainer. You overstepped your role." He paused. "However, you also saved the evening and created the most publicity this restaurant has ever received. We've had hundreds of reservation requests since Saturday. People want to eat here because you work here." "Oh," Elena said quietly. "So here's my problem. I can't have servers who think they can just take over events. But I also can't ignore what happened." He leaned back in his chair. "I'm letting you go, Elena." The words hit her like a punch. "What? You're fired effective immediately. You'll receive 2 weeks severance pay." Elena felt tears burning in her eyes. She needed this job. She needed all 3 of her jobs. "Please, Mr. Bennett, I have bills. My father is sick. I can't—" "I'm not finished," he said. "You're fired as a server because I'm offering you a different position. I want you to play piano here 3 nights a week. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Dinner service. I'll pay you triple what you made serving tables." Elena's mouth fell open. "What? People will come to hear you play. I'll advertise it. Dinner and a performance by Elena Rodriguez, the waitress who took the internet by storm. You'll be good for business." He slid a contract across the desk. "Think about it." Elena stared at the paper. Triple her server salary for 3 nights a week instead of 6. It sounded too good to be true. "There's one catch," Mr. Bennett said. "You can't play anywhere else. Exclusive contract for 1 year. I want you here, not at some other restaurant." Something about the way he said it made Elena uncomfortable. This wasn't about supporting her talent. This was about making money off her viral moment. "I need to think about it," she said. Mr. Bennett looked annoyed. "You're getting offers from other places?" "I don't know. Maybe. There have been a lot of calls." "Well, think fast. This kind of attention doesn't last forever. In a week, people will forget about you and move on to the next viral video." Elena took the contract and left. She walked out through the kitchen, where Christina and Miguel both tried to talk to her, but she kept walking. She needed air. She needed to think. Outside, a reporter approached her immediately. "Elena Rodriguez? I'm with Channel 7 News. Can we ask you a few questions?" "No, sorry, I can't." Elena pushed past her. "Just one question. How does it feel to go from serving tables to becoming an overnight sensation?" Elena stopped walking. She turned to face the reporter. "It feels terrifying," she said honestly. "It feels like everyone wants something from me and I don't know what to do." The reporter blinked, clearly not expecting that answer. But she recovered quickly. "Are you going to pursue music professionally?" I don't know, Elena said. I don't know anything right now. She walked away before the reporter could ask more questions. She took the subway to her other job, the office cleaning service. When she arrived, her supervisor was waiting. Elena, we need to talk. Here it comes, Elena thought. More changes. Everything was changing too fast. Some of the clients saw the video of you, her supervisor said. They're uncomfortable having you clean their offices now. They think you're going to be famous or something. They want someone more normal. Are you firing me? Elena asked, exhausted. I'm sorry. We have to think about the clients. So that was 2 jobs gone in one day. Elena felt like she was falling and couldn't find anything to grab onto. That evening, her phone rang again. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Is this Elena Rodriguez? A woman's voice, elegant and familiar, yes? This is Eleanor Rothschild. We met on Saturday. I told you we needed to talk. Mrs. Rothschild, hi. I'm sorry, it's been a crazy few days. I imagine it has. That's actually why I'm calling. Can you come to my home tomorrow? I have a proposition for you. I don't know if, please, Mrs. Rothschild said gently. I think I can help. And I think you need help right now. Elena was too tired to argue. Okay. Yes, tomorrow. Mrs. Rothschild gave her an address on the Upper East Side and hung up. Elena sat in her tiny apartment that night, eating leftover rice and beans, trying to process everything. In 3 days, her entire life had been turned upside down. She had gone viral, lost 2 jobs, been offered a contract that felt more like a trap than an opportunity, and now she was meeting with one of the richest women in New York. Her upright piano sat in the corner, silent. She hadn't played since Saturday night. She was too overwhelmed, too confused. Playing had always been her escape, but now it felt like the thing that was destroying her life. Her mother called again. Mija, did you see? Someone posted a video of you playing when you were 10 years old. At that recital Mrs. Chen organized. People are saying you were a prodigy. Mama, I can't talk right now. Why, what's wrong? Everything. Everything is wrong. I lost my job. I lost my cleaning job too. Everyone wants something from me and I don't know what I want. You want to play piano, her mother said simply. That's all you've ever wanted. But what if that's not enough? What if I fail? What if this attention goes away and I'm left with nothing? Then you'll still have your music, her mother said. Nobody can take that from you. Elena hung up and stared at the piano. Slowly, she walked over to it. She sat down on the bench. Her fingers found the keys. She played softly, a simple melody she'd written years ago. No audience, no pressure, just her and the music. The song was sad and beautiful. It was about feeling lost, about not knowing which path to choose, about being afraid of both success and failure. As she played, Elena realized something. She hadn't asked for any of this. She hadn't posted the video. She hadn't wanted to go viral. She'd just wanted to save an evening and play a piano that was too beautiful to sit empty. But now that it had happened, she had to make a choice. She could try to go back to her old life, pretend Saturday night never happened. Or she could step forward into this terrifying new reality and see where it led. The problem was she had no idea which choice was right. She finished the song and sat in silence. Tomorrow she would go meet Mrs. Rothschild. Tomorrow she would figure out what to do about Mr. Bennett's contract. Tomorrow she would face whatever came next. But tonight, she just played piano in her tiny apartment, trying to remember why she had fallen in love with music in the first place, trying to remember who she was before the world was. Watching Mrs. Rothschild's townhouse was the kind of building Elena had only seen in movies. 5 stories of limestone and iron balconies on a quiet street lined with trees. A doorman in a uniform opened the door before Elena could even knock. Miss Rodriguez, he said with a slight bow. Mrs. Rothschild is expecting you in the music room. Of course she had a music room. Elena followed him through a entrance hall with marble floors and a chandelier that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. Paintings lined the walls. Real ones, not prints. She recognized a few artists from art history classes she'd taken online. The music room was on the 2nd floor. When the doorman opened the double doors, Elena stopped breathing. The room was filled with instruments. A grand piano, even more beautiful than the one at the restaurant. Violins in glass cases, a cello resting on a stand, shelves of sheet music that reached the ceiling, and windows that let in soft morning light, making everything glow. Mrs. Rothschild sat in a chair by the piano, wearing a simple cream sweater and slacks. She looked smaller here, more human than she had at the gala in her expensive gown. "Elena," she said warmly, "thank you for coming. Please sit." Elena sat on the piano bench because it was closest. Her hands automatically wanted to touch the keys, but she held back. "You're wondering why I asked you here," Mrs. Rothschild said. "Yes, ma'am. Call me Eleanor, please. Mrs. Rothschild makes me feel ancient." She smiled. "I've been thinking about you since Saturday night." "About what you said, that dreams don't pay bills." Elena felt her cheeks get warm. "I shouldn't have said that. It was rude, it was honest, and it was heartbreaking." Eleanor leaned forward. "Tell me about your father." For the next 20 minutes, Elena told her everything. About her father's diabetes and heart problems. About the medical bills that kept piling up. About working 3 jobs, though now it was down to 1. And even that was a complicated offer she didn't know if she should accept. About her mother who cleaned houses and never complained. About giving up music lessons because they couldn't afford them anymore. Eleanor listened without interrupting. When Elena finished, there were tears in the old woman's eyes. "I started my foundation 30 years ago," Eleanor said quietly, "after my husband died. He was a musician. Not famous, but passionate. He believed that music could change lives, especially for young people who didn't have opportunities." She looked at the instruments around them. "We never had children. This room, this foundation, it's how I keep his memory alive." "I'm sorry," Elena said. "Don't be. I'm telling you this because I see in you what my husband always talked about. Raw talent combined with absolute dedication. You didn't have fancy teachers or expensive schools. You taught yourself. Do you know how rare that is?" Elena shook her head. "It's almost unheard of. Most people with natural talent never develop it without proper training."
They give up.
"But you kept going even when it seemed pointless. Even when there was no audience, no reward, no recognition. You played because you had to." "It was the only thing that made sense," Elena said softly. "When I played, everything else just stopped." Eleanor nodded. "That's what my husband used to say." She stood up slowly and walked to her desk. She picked up a folder and brought it back. "I have a proposal for you. Actually, several proposals." Elena took the folder. Inside were documents with official letterheads. Juilliard School of Music, Manhattan School of Music, New England Conservatory. "I made some calls," Eleanor said. "These are scholarship offers. Full rides. Everything paid for. Tuition, housing, books. You could start in the spring semester at any of them." Elena's hand shook as she looked through the papers. "I don't understand. How did you—" "I sent them videos of your performance. I told them about your background. They all want you." Eleanor paused. "But I know what you're thinking. How can you accept when your family needs your income?" "Exactly," Elena whispered. "My father needs his medication. My mother can't work more hours. She's already exhausted. I can't just abandon them to chase a dream. What if you didn't have to choose?" Eleanor pulled out another document. "I'm prepared to set up a trust fund for your parents. Medical expenses, living costs, everything covered, for as long as needed." Elena looked up sharply. "What? No, I can't accept that." "That's too much." "Why is it too much? I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. My husband and I always said wealth should be used to create opportunities, not just collect in accounts." Eleanor's voice was firm but kind. "This isn't charity, Elena, this is investment. I believe in you. I believe you could become something extraordinary, but only if you have the chance to train properly." "But why me?" "You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you worked 3 jobs to support your family. I know you practiced piano every night even when you were exhausted. I know you had the courage to walk onto that stage when you had everything to lose." Eleanor smiled. "And I heard you play. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I don't know what to say. Say yes. Go to school. Learn from the best teachers. Develop your gift. And then someday, when you're successful, help someone else the way I'm helping you." Elena looked down at the papers in her lap. Juilliard. She had dreamed about Juilliard when she was a kid, before she learned how impossible it was, before she learned that dreams were luxuries for people who could afford them. "There's one more thing," Eleanor said. She handed Elena another document. "I want you to perform at Carnegie Hall in 6 months. A debut concert. The foundation will sponsor it. All proceeds will go to music education programs for underprivileged youth. Carnegie Hall? Elena's voice came out as a squeak. I can't perform at Carnegie Hall. Why not? You performed for 300 people at the gala with no preparation. This time you'll have 6 months to prepare and the best teachers in the country helping you. But what if I fail? What if people only cared because I was a waitress and it was viral? What if the real music world thinks I'm a joke? Eleanor reached over and took Elena's hand. Then you fail, and you learn, and you try again. That's what artists do. She squeezed gently. But I don't think you'll fail. I think you're going to be magnificent. Elena sat there holding these documents that could change her entire life. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but another part, the part that had learned to be practical and careful, was terrified. Can I think about it? She asked. Of course. Take a few days. But Elena, don't let fear make your decision. Don't let doubt talk you out of this. You've already proven you're talented enough. The only question is whether you're brave enough. Elena left the townhouse in a daze. She walked for a while, not really paying attention to where she was going. She ended up in Central Park, sitting on a bench watching people jog past and kids play on the grass. Her phone buzzed. It was Mr. Bennett from the restaurant, asking if she'd made a decision about his contract. She ignored it. She thought about what her mother had said. You want to play piano? That's all you've ever wanted. She thought about her father, who had worked construction for 20 years to support his family, even though it destroyed his body. She thought about Mrs. Chen, her old piano teacher, saying, "Don't let it die." And she thought about herself at 7 years old, sitting at a piano for the first time, feeling like she'd found the thing she was meant to do. Elena pulled out her phone and called her mother. "Mama," she said, "I need to tell you something. And I need you to be honest with me." "What is it, mija?" "If I went back to school, if I studied music seriously, would you be okay with that? Would Papa be okay with that?" Her mother was quiet for a long moment. "Is this about that woman from the gala, Mrs. Rothschild?" "Yes, she's offering to help. With everything. School, bills, all of it. And you're afraid to say yes. I'm terrified." Her mother's voice was soft but strong. "Elena, your father and I, we didn't come to this country so you could spend your life working 3 jobs. We came so you could have opportunities, so you could be more than we were. But I don't want to abandon you. You're not abandoning us. You're becoming who you're supposed to be. That's what parents want. That's all we've ever wanted." Elena closed her eyes. Tears streamed down her face. "What if I'm not good enough?" "You're good enough. You've always been good enough. Now you just need to believe it." That night, Elena went home and played her piano, not for an audience, not for views or likes or recognition, just for herself. She played everything she knew, and some things she made up on the spot. She played until her fingers hurt and her back ached and she was exhausted, and then she called Eleanor Rothschild and said yes. 3 months later, Elena Rodriguez walked into Juilliard on her first day of classes. She was nervous and excited and still couldn't quite believe this was real. She met her professors, who had seen her viral video and were eager to help her refine her technique. She met other students, some of whom had been training since they were 3 years old, but who treated her with respect instead of judgment. She practiced 8 hours a day. She learned things she didn't even know she didn't know. She discovered that as good as she was, she could be so much better. And the better she got, the more she fell in love with music all over again. 6 months after the gala, Elena stood backstage at Carnegie Hall. She wore a simple black dress. Her hair was done professionally for the first time in her life. She could hear the audience taking their seats. The hall was sold out. 2,800 people had come to hear the Waitress pianist play. Mrs. Chen was in the audience. Her mother and father in the front row. Miguel and Christina from the restaurant. Eleanor Rothschild in her usual seat. And thousands of strangers who had seen a video and wanted to hear the rest of the story. Elena walked onto the stage. The lights were bright. The Steinway grand piano waited for her, spotlit and perfect. She sat down on the bench, adjusted her position, placed her fingers on the keys. The audience was silent. Elena took a deep breath. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a 7-year-old with a dream to a 24-year-old with a chance. From invisible to seen. From surviving to thriving. And then she began to play. The music that poured out of that piano was everything she had learned and everything she had lived. It was technical mastery and raw emotion. It was classical training and street-smart improvisation. It was the sound of someone who had earned every single note. When she finished, the applause was deafening. People stood. They cheered. They cried. But the best moment came later after the concert when a young girl approached her. Maybe 10 years old, shy and nervous. "Miss Elena," the girl said quietly, "I saw your video. I play piano too, but my family can't afford lessons anymore." Elena knelt down to the girl's level. She smiled, thinking of herself at that age, thinking of all the people who had helped her get here. "What's your name?" she asked. "Lucia." "Well, Lucia, let me tell you a secret. You don't need expensive lessons to be a musician. You just need passion and practice and patience. If you have those things, nothing can stop you." Elena pulled out a card. "This is for a program I started. Free music lessons for kids whose families can't afford them. Call this number. I want to hear you play." The girl's eyes went wide. She clutched the card like it was made of gold. "Really?" "Really," Elena said. "Someone gave me a chance when I needed it most. Now it's my turn to give chances to others." As Elena watched the girl run back to her parents, she felt something settle in her chest. This was why she played. Not for fame or money or recognition, but for moments like this, for the chance to change someone's life the way hers had been changed. She looked around Carnegie Hall one more time, memorizing it. This place had once seemed impossible, a dream too big to even imagine. But here she was, and somewhere out there, another waitress or janitor or grocery store clerk was playing piano in their tiny apartment, dreaming of a moment like this. Elena hoped they would get their chance too. She hoped they would be brave enough to take it. Because everyone deserves to be heard. Everyone deserves to play their song.